Good day and welcome to the online process safety seminar organized by CGE Risk. We have a truly dynamic and exciting session ahead of us. My name is Daniel Piras. I'm a moderator, navigator and connecting host throughout the seminar today. This year we're delivering our first virtual event to all of you. Worldwide, but at the same time directly to your home. We are live here in the studio and event living room in The Hague, right here in the Netherlands. We're all living in a time where people live confined to their homes, work from home and keep social distance. And this makes us feel as if we're disconnected from our family and friends, but also from our colleagues and peers. That's why we think it's very important to stay connected to you. We're very excited that you're here with us today. Let's start over to our event living room. And again, on behalf of CGE Risk, welcome again live from our event living room here in The Hague, the Netherlands, where I currently am together with Professor Jop Groeneweg, good morning, and joined by our online speakers, Daniel Rowe, Justin Naik, and David Metcalfe. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. Good morning.
And I say good morning, and that is if you are, of course, in Europe. If you are in the Middle East, in Asia, or in Australia, it probably is good afternoon to everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, what are we going to do today? Get ready to be inspired, as these knowledgeable men are all here to share their take on Connected by Risk for you. First, we will listen to Daniel Rowe's story about the risk journey of SBM Offshore. Next, we will move into the world of psychological safety with Professor Jop Groeneweg here. And subsequently, we will hear more about the acquisition of CGE Risk by WK from Justin Naik. And finally, we will look at the future with co-founder and the CEO of Verdantix, David Metcalfe. And although you might have thought that you can sit back and relax, we would like to invite you to be interactive and to interact with our speakers by live polls and by the Q&A. So go ahead and claim your seat at this table here in The Hague. It is the perfect opportunity to raise all questions that you have and to make it an inspirational event together. And how can we do that? Well, that's simple, using Mentimeter. So grab your smartphone or a tablet or anything that will connect to the internet, and let's start using Mentimeter. And you can simply use the QR code and then you will go right into the system, or go to your browser, go to menti.com and use the code 9695415. And we probably will have a delay on the live stream, and that means that you will see the questions earlier than I call upon you to digit your answers. So you are a little ahead of that, and we are fully aware of that, of course. So if you are connected with Mentimeter, we have a couple of questions to know where you're all from. Are you all here in the Netherlands, in Europe? Are you in Australia? Where are you all from? And we actually prepared a couple of introducing questions. And the first introducing question is, which country are you from? Which country are you from? And which country are you from right now? So not your origin country, but where are you right now? And we have the Netherlands, of course, and the bigger the country, the more people have given the same answer. Netherlands is big, Switzerland, UK, France, Italy, Australia, Oman, the UK, we see Denmark. What do we see more? Ukraine, Sweden, Singapore. Good afternoon to all people from Singapore. What do we have more? And we see that we already exceed more than 50 respondents, so that goes well. New Zealand. And I will give you the opportunity. Malaysia. That is great. Germany, slightly bigger. We also have some people from the United States, and it's in the middle of the night there, so we're very happy that you're up watching. South Africa, that's great. South Africa. We have the United Arab Emirates. Also, we see Greece. And And right now we are going up to almost 100 people. So that's great. And I see India. Yes, I see India as well. So from all over the world, Jop, that's great. That's great. Let's go to the next country. The next question. What's your current job title? What is your current job title? Please give that answer as well. And like I said, you will probably see it earlier than the question on the live stream. What do we have? We have a couple of answers. What is your current job title? Managing Director, Inspector, Safety Superintendent, Director Operations, CEO, Airline Pilot, Principal Consultant, Manager, Scientist, Director of Risk, of course, Inspector, Manager, MD. We have a lot of different, so that's great. And raising. And you can see the word cloud over here. Risk Manager, Consultant Manager, Principal Consultant, and MD are the current job titles. And the final question is a multiple choice question. Have you thought about the potential hazards that you're exposed to in your current environment? That is the final question. And let me see what people give as an answer over there. And that varies. We see that a lot of people, 60% right now, and raising says, yes, I am fully aware. 1/3 says partly that I could give it more thought. Please do so and be in a safe environment, of course. And 0% says no, thanks, but thanks for reminding me. Okay, so this is the Mentimeter. This is the way, ladies and gentlemen, to give all your questions. And it is time to start the first presentation. But before we go over to Daniel, there's something that we would like to get your opinion on. That's the next question in the Mentimeter. It's an introducing question, actually, before I will pass the floor to Daniel. And the question is, what is important for process safety management? What is important for process safety management? And you can give votes from 0 to 10. It's a 10 scale. And what is more important? And we can see here that we have an average. The average is 8, strong barrier hardware and human elements. A strong HSE culture is 7.7, and a competent and empowered risk team is 8.3. And raising, we will give you some time to provide all the answers, because we can see that the scales are rising. The strong HSA culture is rising tremendously right now, almost reaching the 9. They're all very high, actually, all above average. So, Daniel, I'm curious what you think about this outcome, and I will give it over to you. And ladies and gentlemen, the next slide, the Mentimeter, is for your questions. So should you have a question, feel free to raise it. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks very much, Donatello. Okay, yeah, well, it's certainly interesting. I guess it's we could expect that. I would hope that having an educated audience here, that we would have a fair spread across those different areas. Obviously, and we did this intentionally to not give people the option of saying all three. Because what we wanted to get is a feeling from having all these people together as to what they felt was the most important. And yeah, they are all important. I guess what we're going to talk more about today is that first one. It is about having strong human and hardware elements to our barrier systems and KPIs to back those up. But they are supported by the other two. And without all three, I think we'll find that the industry would suffer. So it's good to see that we're all on the same page. As introduced by Donatello, I'm here today to talk a little bit about our journey to operational risk management and process safety, about SBM Offshore. And I guess I can't really do that without starting by telling a little bit about SBM Offshore itself. So SBM is a company which was founded in 1969 in its current form in the Netherlands. It's been built on various companies that really started off working with the oceans. The ocean has been part of our DNA since the 18th century. But our journey with process safety probably started in earnest with our first lease and operate FPSOs that came in 1981. This is not the first, obviously. This is one of our Brazilian units. And that really took us to the realization about what's in the pipe and the damage and the harm that it can do to our people and to the environment. So we really started to look at things there. But we have, over the years, evolved quite a lot, as is the industry. I mean, we've learned a lot, unfortunately, from some bad incidents, but also from what's gone right. And that's enabled us to really push where I sit, which is in group operational excellence, to target excellence. Our idea is to be the best in what we do, to be a high performer in our marketplaces, but also in our health safety and our process safety. Our strategy as a company for getting there is built on our values, integrity, care, entrepreneurship, and ownership. And we're really looking at the moment, particularly, I guess, in quite an interesting phase in the world. I mean, Donatello talked about the fact that we're all doing this virtually, which is the first experience for me, maybe some of our other presenters as well. But it's a change which has occurred because of COVID. And there's many other changes that are occurring in the world as well. We've got greenhouse gases, which we know are an issue, which is transforming the energy industry to make it a little bit more green, a little bit more sustainable. And for us, we believe that this is the right way to go. We have a target to get there by 2040, but we do believe that the oceans will continue to provide the world's energy in a safe and sustainable way for a long time. So we're working on this, and we're taking what is our good processes that we've put in place for process safety, and we're looking at how it could be applied other ways as well. But to get back to the process safety aspect, where it sits within the organization under target excellence is within our hazard and effects management process. Hazard and effects management as a named process started for us a few years ago, but process safety started under the leadership of Donnie McLean and Eric Van Kirk really in 2014 when we applied the CCPS framework. I can hear... there's a bit of feedback coming on the line, guys, just to let you know.
Yeah, sorry. But, sorry, Daniel, that was me. Please proceed.
Okay. So, yes. Our journey really started in about 2014. We applied a framework, dealt with some of those aspects that were in the initial question, really talks about culture, about our leadership. It talks about barriers as well. Our barrier system, like most of our colleagues or our industry partners, started a bit earlier. And when we first started doing barriers, we had no definitions. We all knew that barriers were important. We all knew that they are what keep us safe. But if you went from one company to another, how we defined barriers was different. And this caused us all sorts of problems in the industry. So in 2016, OGP brought out their report 544, which really helped us to define for the first time what a barrier is. One of the key aspects that came from this was a realization that procedures are bits of paper. They're not actually what keep people safe on offshore units or elsewhere. What keeps people safe is hardware and humans. It's the activities that we do, and it's the equipment which is there to ensure that the hydrocarbons stay in the pipe. And this was a good realization. What it enabled us to do was to say, right, we need to concentrate on this. We talk about the hardware barriers. We identify those pieces of equipment that are there to keep us safe. And for the humans, we talk about operating discipline. One of the issues that we had with OGP, or we still got this in our system, of course, is we really concentrate a lot on the hardware. It's easy to see. We got very specific. We built performance standards that looked at equipment. We did, we split things into groups, and we were able to manage our systems that way. When we looked at the humans, it was more difficult. When we looked at the humans, we stayed high level. We talked about culture. We talked about supervision, and we talked about following procedures. So this was something that we thought we could improve upon. This really did happen with CCPS and the Energy Institutes in 2018 when they brought out their new guidance, their concept book, and this is something that we've applied. Within the concept book, it took a different approach. It said that all barriers must be effective, they must be independent, and they must be auditable. This is a key concept. It also said, well, rather than having 2 types of groups of barriers, we actually have 5. We have the passive hardware barriers, and this is not really different from OGP. We talk about piping integrity in OGP. We talk about piping integrity in CCPS. But there's also active hardware. Now, active hardware was one of the ones that first made us think, well, actually, in OGP, we talked about detection systems, shutdown systems, firefighting systems. But in CCPS, we talk about detect, decide, and act. Detect, decide, and act. And that was a key thing for us. And we realized that actually, if we put them as separate things on our bow ties, we may give the impression that we're safer than we are, because all of them have to work together. But the real one that really made us realize that maybe we thought about things slightly wrong is that third one, active hardware plus human. This says that we don't have hardware and human barriers, but sometimes we actually have them together. The human is part of a barrier system with hardware elements. And this was a good learning for us. It enabled us to close our bow ties up more and start to understand what it is that really makes us safe. So we started to get to things that look more like this. It also enabled us, but we have a lot of data that we've got in there, a lot of things that we want to keep. So we needed to get that into the system. And tools like Bowtie XP, which we've been using for a long period, give us that ability. It gives us the ability to put a lot of metadata. We can talk about the barrier system itself, and we give it the name, which is across the top. We can say how effective it is, whether it's low, medium, high effectiveness, and we have criteria that we give for that. We give it the type of barrier system that it is, whether it's passive, active, and we can put all the tasks that are there, the ones in white. We can talk about the tasks that humans do, the specific things that humans must do for this barrier to work as it's intended. We can put our equipment types, what's in orange, and of course we can put performance standards, what we expect in terms of the FASI model, functionality, availability, reliability, survivability. So all of that was good. It got us a good place. But we realized, again, as probably a few people in the industry, that there's still some difficulties with the CCPS model, the CCPS, an Energy Institute model. If you look at what's on the screen at the moment, you can see that there's 3 barrier systems. The first barrier system is gas detection and shutdown and blowdown. And the third barrier system is gas detection and electrical isolation. Well, actually, they both have a common mode failure. They both have utilized the same detectors. So following CCPS and Energy Institute, they should actually be one. It should be gas detection, shutdown, and electrical isolation. Okay. But then if you look at the second barrier system, this is passive ignition prevention, your EX systems. Well, this will not be effective if electrical isolation doesn't work. So in fact, in effectiveness, those two should be together. And you can't put all 3 of them together because some are active and some are passive. So that breaks the other rule within CCPS. So this is the problem that we found in our specific application. And the solution that we found was to apply the Norwegian model. And we came to this by working with Mark Bolt and DNB, who helped us to gave us some advice in terms of what we see in Norway. And where we came to for that was to say, well, perhaps as a rule set, what if we separate our systems in 2 ways? We separate them because of the type, because that follows one of the rules from CCPS, and we separate them because of their function. Now, their functionality will enable us to say why they're different, and then we show the common cause failure, and that's why we separate those 2. As you can see, as we go from left to right, our barrier systems are built on reducing the size of the hazardous situation, preventing ignition, reducing the amount of people impacted, and eventually to reduce the severity of people impacted. So as you move further along, situations getting worse and the barriers act in a certain way. This gave us 2 additional great benefits. Firstly, if you look at all of our units have the same functional barrier groupings. I mean, the function of reducing a hazardous situation is why we have barriers. They form a function. So by doing this, we enabled to have a consistency in how we describe our barriers on our units. We also say we can identify all the systems that are possible to provide that function. So we build on what we've got, we get consistency, and we change data. We can see good practices on one unit, bad practices on another unit, and we can transfer. We also have the ability to communicate better. If you're speaking to someone and you can say that this is ignition prevention, this is what it needs to do, then they understand the functionality, why it's important to have that barrier system working. And it also gave us one other additional benefit, and that is where we want to get to with live barriers. Now, live barriers is something that we've been looking at. I'm sure some of the people that are online already have this. For us, we really wanted to build on the CCPS model, and that means that it needs to be a very modern take. A live barrier system that we're approaching is one of Wolters Kluwer's, I'm sorry if I got the name wrong, sister companies, which is eVision and their barrier vision software. And we're only just starting on this. But what we want to do here is to demonstrate the condition of our barriers. We have a performance standard. It shows the condition, how far along on the pass-fail criteria. So this is good. And it also shows that if we know a barrier is degraded and we know its function, then we know what kind of function we should be trying to replace, if it's necessary to replace it. It enables us to target our work processes. Instead of doing a task risk assessment and showing that we have 27 other barriers, which aren't actually barriers, what we can do is to say, this barrier is degraded, I want to do this work process, and this is the function that this barrier used to provide. So how can I bring this function back? That's really useful for us. It enables us to be more leading. What you're seeing here, the top view is what we call the asset integrity view. We can split things by equipment types to say that these are the equipment types that we need to work on. And there's probably a similarity in the types of maintenance that they do. But in terms of risk, we want to break away from the OGP model and say we want to take these bow ties or these scenarios, take what we have at the safety case, where you might have 10 or 20 bow ties, and blow it out across the unit. Now, we're applying some business rules for it. It's going to be an interesting journey, and we're only just starting on this. So that's the point where we sort of get to when we're saying, okay, we've got live barriers now, and people can make decisions. We want to go further. The next thing is to say, okay, this tells us the condition of the barriers, but what about when the barriers will fail? How do we become more predictive? And for that, we're starting to look at the barrier failure model, or the equipment failure model, the human failure models. We're only starting here, but of course, we've started by mapping on the equipment. The hardware is the easy one for us. Why could it fail? We don't give the requirements correct. That's one reason. We could design it, procure it, construct it. It's another reason. And we could operate it wrong. And we put controls in place to prevent that threat from occurring, or that cause to the failure from occurring. And what that enables us to do is to really become leading, further away from the potential failure, so that we can help to ensure that offshore, the guys offshore, always have those good barrier systems. It doesn't get away from the need to have a HSC culture, which is always aware, that is chronically on knees, that is always looking for what could go wrong and working together. And it doesn't get away from the need to have a strong and empowered risk team, because without those, we won't actually apply this process, we won't apply it well. But it does make it easier for those processes to be supported. And that's really what we want to get to. So it'd be interesting to see what people out there think in terms of, particularly those who've been applying the CCPS model, about some of the things that they might have found, some of the struggles, because it is a complex thing, and we're looking forward to where the journey will take us. But thanks very much for the opportunity to come and present some of the things we've been working on to you today, Donatella.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And let's switch to some questions. And we have a couple of questions, so I'm speeding up a little bit. There you go. First one, is it effective to use bow ties for LOPA, so for layers of protection analysis?
It can do. I mean, they are different tools. There is a LOPA module that Bowtie XP has. So it can give you a visualization, but it is not true LOPA to me. Okay. True LOPA is requires a different concept.
All right. Then to question, this one says, interesting to note that there's more tags on the RHS of the bow tie wells. The focus should be more on the left in the operational state. And another one says, noted that most of your barriers are on the right side of your bow tie, which means that you're mitigating the effect on the event. How about prevention? Do you use the same philosophy?
It's when you start to apply the rule set in CCPS, you will find that actually you will have very few barriers on the left-hand side. And people who have gone through that will find it very quickly. If you take the overpressure scenario, the two critical barriers that we have is our safety instrumented system, SIS, and a PSV. The other elements that are in there, the integrity of the pipeline, itself is not designed for a full overpressure case. Therefore, it's not a barrier for us. The human control, it's important and it keeps us in plane, but we really rely on those two barriers. If those two barriers are not there, then the system will fail. That's what we believe. Corrosion, we have corrosion inhibitor, we have corrosion resistant materials, we may have a safety margin. We have very few things that we put on the left-hand side, which is normal. Once you get to the right, you're progressing to many different stages. Another way to think about it is in your bow tie, your top event should be the first moment you lose control. And then once you lose control, there's many different events that occur afterwards. That gets back to the LOPA thing. One of the reasons why it's not so effective from LOPA is because there's many different ways that a scenario can develop. Whereas on a bow tie, it shows just one way. So it means that you do have more on the right-hand side because first you're trying to reduce the hazardous situation, then you're trying to stop ignition. Ignition occurs as another event. You're then trying to get people to safety and reduce the size of the event. And then you're trying to evacuate as another event. You've started to escalate and you lost control. So from all of our bow ties, we do find there's more on the right. The other thing about more tags on the very right, this is because our barrier systems become very complex when we get to the right. If you think about on the left-hand side, a PSV is actually one piece of equipment with a detector side act component. When you get to the very right, evacuation, we've got lifeboats, we've got rescue craft, we might have a helicopter, you've got life vests, we've got many different systems that have to work in order to give that barrier its functionality. That's going to actually be one of the very interesting things because on the left, it's very easy to show condition, but showing that degradation on a scenario on the very right is going to be very difficult because we have a lot of redundancy in what we do on the right as well.
Thank you, Daniel. Very, very interesting. Another question, what challenges have you come across as a business to engage and interact with your workforce to implement safe culture? And this is one question, and I've seen another one. So two people that have raised the same question.
So culture is one of the hardest things that we deal with in process safety. I guess it's a little bit off to the left. We've got a lot of training programs that we've done.
Yes.
The biggest challenge, I guess, is trying to get leadership to embrace and to really enforce. I mean, that to us is the most effective way to do things, is to make sure that our leaders are there, are present, they demonstrate the necessity of these processes, and they show the priority in the decisions that they make. The challenge, particularly on process safety, is when we start talking about controls, particularly if something goes wrong, if we're talking about shutting down a unit, it's very expensive. So trying to get that it's a very big decision that someone has to make. Empowering is extremely important, and that's our way that we're trying to work with it.
All right. Final question already due to time limitations, but how often do you perform assessments, somebody asks, of new sites, locations, and reassessments?
Yeah. So we follow the safety case process. For us, if there's been any change, management of change, if we do change the way that we're managing our hazards, anything to do with our major hazard scenarios, then we will update our safety case. We will reassess the risk. Any inhibit, of course, of a safety critical element will need to go through a risk assessment process. On top of that, every 5 years, we go through a formal safety case review, gap assessment and updates. And that's our process. Every time we go to a new unit, we do all of our risk assessments again, of course. One thing which is key to our conceptual approach to FPSOs is our fast forward program.
All right.
Fast forward gives us a concept which is quite robust. And so it enables us to take all of those conceptual level decisions up front. And when we get to the project phase, we're able to accelerate in our risk assessments on the detailed design level.
Okay. We have some questions more, but we don't have any time now. But we can already say to all people that have raised some questions, we will answer all questions that you have raised. So don't hesitate to raise the questions. And even though Daniel can't answer them right now in the live stream, we will do subsequently. But for now, Daniel Rowe, thank you not only for your presentation, but for all your answers provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donatello. Have a nice day.
And now let's switch to the next presentation. Jop Groeneweg, Professor Jop Groeneweg, we're very pleased that you're here in our event living room here in The Hague. Good morning again to you. Yes, and we are looking forward to your presentation, but let us first have one poll via the Mentimeter prior to your presentation. So inviting everyone again on your phones or on your tablets for the introducing question. And the introducing question is as follows. Does your organization maximally utilize team members' personal, professional, and social potential to generate great ideas to reduce risks. Does your organization maximally utilize team members' personal, professional, and social potential to generate great ideas to reduce risks? And I will give you a couple of more seconds to give us some answers. And we can already see the tendency right now, Professor Jop Groeneweg, that we have, let's say, 1/3 says yes, or a quarter right now. It is going down. And let's say 3/4 or 80% right now that says no. And of course, I think it's already representative, I guess, because we have more than 50 people responding. Are you surprised with his answer?
No, this is actually quite in line with what we find in the industry. And
really?
It's such a pity. I mean, such a waste of resources. So it's definitely one of the new frontiers when it comes to improving risk management to tackle.
All right. I'm very curious to know more about the world of psychological safety. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Donatella. But first, let's move to the world of Formula One racing.
Oh.
And I'd like to show you the world record pit stop by Max Verstappen. So
From Red Bull Racing.
Red Bull Racing.
Yes.
Now in slow motion, but it's even faster in slow motion.
I mean, it's a blink of an eye.
It's 1.82 seconds.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
I remember the time where 7 seconds was fast. That has amazing, this team.
And look how proud they were at the end.
Uh-huh.
So what is it in this team that makes them so outstanding when it comes to pit stops? So what is it in the pit crew that makes them stand out? But there's just a few more data. On the top you can see the consistency in their performance. They have a very small bandwidth in terms of performance. They're always good. They're always fast.
Very consistent.
Very consistent, unlike some others, and I will not mention any names for those.
Oh Lord! I'm just checking Ferrari.
Yes, you're the Ferrari. Yes. Well, not too bad. But there, and then you may think, Jop, it's only 0.4 seconds. But but that's in the world of Formula One racing. That is an age. So that's a long time. So they're very good. They're consistently good, and this is an overview of all their fastest pit stop times in 2019, and you see they're always in the top 20. They actually monopolize the top 5. And now the sad picture, and this is the competition in the slowest pit stop times, and they're never in the slowest. So they're
never in the slowest.
They're never in the slowest. They're always in the fastest, and never in the slowest.
Wow!
And that is an amazing achievement.
Yes.
But now comes the really intriguing story, and that's the Hungary Grand Prix. Where Max Verstappen, due to slippery conditions, hit a barrier and his car needed to be repaired.
That was prior to the race, just before.
That was prior to the race.
Yes.
They had 20 minutes to go, and they had no plan to fix it. They had no procedure. They had not trained for this scenario. They decided, let's have a go, and they used the team's collective expertise to try to fix it. They were not sure of success, but they decided, let's have a go. And 30 seconds before the deadline, they managed to fix the car. Max could start, and he faced the finish in the second place. And that was an amazing achievement. Even the competition was deeply impressed and said, we would probably have not pulled this off. He has an exceptional pit crew. So,
because normally this would take much longer.
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
At least 90 minutes. And they managed to do it in 20 minutes. So that's an incredible achievement.
Without any, they have never done this before.
They've never done this before. And that is a lesson to us all when it comes to thinking about safety. And to be honest, if I had given this presentation 2 decades ago, I would probably have presented the disaster.
Oh, yes.
So an exploding platform, a nuclear reactor, plane crash, and maybe Max Verstappen would show up if he had crashed. But a success story would not be the natural habitat of the safety professional. And there's a change going on. So rather than only learn from what goes wrong, we now move into an era where we need to learn also from what goes exceptionally well. When I started my career in safety many moons ago, the situation was terrible. We had plenty of accidents to learn from, but we are now about 96% safer than we were in the dark 80s. And I agree, 4% is definitely not good enough, but we made an incredible leap. So our learning potential from these incidents becomes smaller and smaller. So we now have to look to different sources of information. And what better place to look at exceptional success stories, and what can we learn from that? So what makes this team so successful?
Yeah, I'm wondering.
And one of the key findings is they're very open towards each other. They share experience and they trust each other. They hold each other accountable. They know exactly what the responsibility of each of the individuals is. They know what each can deliver. They trust each other's professional abilities. They communicate very closely. And they're a team that is really dedicated to get it done. With every member involved. And this is a truly inspiring story. And it's not the first story. From a scientific perspective, it started with a project in Google by Amy Edmondson a few years ago, where Google asked Amy to look at the question, why are some teams better performing than others? And the obvious answer in those days was like, okay, probably the people in the better teams are more competent, better educated, or in any way, professionally better people. But to the utmost surprise, they actually didn't find that. What they found is that the quality of the teamwork was determined by the effectiveness of the psychological safety in the team. Did people dare to speak up? Did they dare what they had? The definition of psychological safety is that people dare to take social risk. So they dare to speak up. And then you may wonder, what is so risky about speaking up? But being open in a meeting and just give your bright ideas, present your bright ideas, is definitely not a trivial thing. I was in a meeting where there was a very junior person who we were discussing a project, and the junior person just asked the question, couldn't we do it this way? And the more senior guy stood up and said, who are you to tell me that I did something wrong? I've been doing this for 20 years.
Wow.
Who are you? So this is probably
Classical.
the last time the person spoke up.
Yes, ruined.
And most importantly, the information in this person's mind will never see the day of life. So that's a true waste of resources. So she looked in depth in what determines the quality of that team, and also at some of the aspects of the leadership in those teams. And what she found is very, very interesting. One of the key characteristics of a team that is very successful is that they are being judged upon the process rather than the outcome. So what do I mean with that? If everybody gives it their very best, it doesn't really matter what the outcome is. What matters is that you evaluate the effort. So
back to Red Bull.
Yeah, back to Red Bull. If they had been 31 seconds late, they would have missed the deadline, and Max would not have been able
to race.
But they still managed to do something, not in 90 minutes, but in 20 minutes and 31 seconds. That's an enormous achievement.
Yes.
So they should have celebrated it anyway. Everybody gave it their very best. They missed the deadline. In traditional safety terms, it would have been a miss. it would have been an incident, but in fact they did something that was extraordinary.
Yeah.
So really successful teams judge each other not on the outcome but on the process.
And what should the manager have been saying in case of not achieving the deadline?
Great job, folks. Too bad we didn't make it.
Right.
Great job.
Yeah. Instead of,
Yes.
shoot, we missed it.
Yes, it's same with children at school, huh?
Yeah, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
my daughter. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we emphasize and we focus more on the things that we didn't achieve
Yeah.
than rather than focus on the things that they achieve.
Yeah, so the typical child comes home with a very high grade, say an 8 on a 10-point scale.
Yes.
And what's then the first question parents ask?
What did the rest do?
What did the rest do? So
What's
that's
the average?
terrible. So an 8, suppose your daughter has been working very hard, very proud of the 8, and your first question is, what did the rest do? And if the answer that they all had 9s, then suddenly that whole effort is like, oh yeah, well, that's not very good. So we should really relate the quality of people's effort to standards of rather than the outcome. So
yes.
we did good. So we are now entering a new dawn, the new dawn in safety. We have come from the technological age. We move towards focusing on the individual. Then for some reason we jump to the organization with factors like culture and leadership,
Yes.
and they're all important. But now we move into the era of the team, and I'm quite convinced that establishing psychological safety in teams will, for the next decade or so, be one of the issues. So individual, organization, and teams. And if we focus on all three, we can unleash all the potential in our employees. And that means that we do not only reduce risk, but also get all the energy flowing for innovations, for doing the work in a better way. So it's not only anymore about avoiding the bad, but it's also about stimulating the good and focusing on the bright future.
Yes.
So I'm very optimistic.
Wow.
Very optimistic.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
well,
Fascinating. So
hopefully,
to focus
yeah.
more on the process than on
Yeah.
the outcome, because we have a lot of questions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good news. Good news. They're still alive.
The first one is one that crossed my mind as well, Professor Groeneweg, and that is, should we focus more on culture when looking for ways to improve safety? And how would you do that? Because I was thinking, is cultural difference, is that something that, I mean, in the Red Bull team, for instance, makes it a difference whether they're from Austria and not from Italy, or not from Malaysia, or not from, I mean, or Latin America. I mean, we have an international audience today. Are cultural differences important and specific? Should we focus more on culture?
Well, if you look at a range of studies, you will find that, yes, of course, there are cultural differences, but there are the main issue are personal differences.
All right.
So diversity in the teams is one of the key factors that you should focus on. So you might, for instance, have introverts and extroverts in the
Yes.
team. And how do you make introverts speak up? You need more psychological safety because extroverts will be screaming and shouting anyway. but how to open up? And maybe you have to find new ways. But one of the characteristics of a psychological safe team is, for instance, that everybody has a say.
Yes.
So if we had been here with 5 people, we would have given every 5 the floor.
True that.
And by just opening up the first time makes it easier to open up the second time. So yes, culture is important, but it's especially important that you create a culture of diversity, openness, and inclusiveness in your team.
And somebody asks, what in your eyes is the most effective tool to change culture from reactive to proactive? Is that about creating a safe environment to speak up?
It is a mindset that changes from let's have a look and evaluate all the disasters towards can we have a discussion about what's ahead of us. So proactive means, yes, we think back, but also we look ahead. So the team's focus is not on the failures of last race, but the team's focus is on the next 2 races and what can we do to improve even further. They do not necessarily go for world records. That's a side effect. What they really want is to achieve top quality also next time. So a reactive organization would deal with last year's races. A proactive organization will think, what can we do in the next 5 races to become even better?
All right. A couple of questions now about the process instead of the outcomes. So somebody asks, how do you get your team to focus on process instead of outcomes? And somebody else says, well, we gravitate to outcome as they are easy to measure. So how do you measure process actually?
Nobody said it would easy. I said it takes a decade. I didn't say we will fix this tomorrow.
No.
Process indicators are really hard to measure in terms of what did the team do. To some extent, it relates to accountability and dependability. So do I know what I am accountable for in my job within a given process? And can everybody depend on that I deliver what I'm supposed to deliver? And those are things you can evaluate. So yes, output parameters are easy to measure.
Yes.
But at the same time, they have a large random component and might actually frustrate people. So imagine that Max would have said after 20 minutes and 31 seconds, you did a very lousy job, bad news. But now everybody could show in an evaluation afterwards that they gave it their very best. So, and I know it's very tempting to develop all kind of checklists and so on. But to some extent, this is also just sit together and discuss what have you done to contribute to the process. So it's much more an evaluation afterwards where you discuss everybody's contribution rather than saying 0.8 or 0.6.
All right.
And that will especially be in the petrochemical company and also other industries an issue because they like 0.8, 0.6, 0.7.
Yes.
We can measure psychological safety in a team quite reliably. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can also model and measure the road to psychological safety in terms of what do teams have to do as easy as that.
The example of the race car was very inspiring because somebody, and that was one of the first questions already, the example of the race car refuting is an example of high performance team based on lean principles. Somebody says, for safety, companies generally focus on minimum regulatory compliance. How can companies change this way of thinking to more value-based thinking?
Well, if you look at it from a cultural perspective, this depending on regulatory requirements, is typical from an organization with, say, pathological to calculative approach. So it's definitely not proactive.
No.
I mean, regulators are
mitigating risks.
Yeah, regulators hardly have ahead of the curve. So you have to take your own responsibility, folks. Do you want to be outstanding or do you want to be mediocre, running behind government regulations? Yes. So what is it? What is it in your ambitions? And their leadership comes back. And I hope that leadership can inspire the teams to the extent that all they want to deliver is the best work possible. And then something funny should happen. Once these teams are empowered and enabled, they actually will not accept a leader who will say, well, a bit less is... No, they will just say, listen, folks, we are a company that wants to achieve the best every time. So every project for us is a learning opportunity. We give it our very best. We evaluate it, but we always go for top quality.
Right. More questions are being raised, but we will answer them. But unfortunately, we run out of time. But thank you so much for this inspiring example and giving all the answers. Professor Jop Groeneweg, ladies and gentlemen. And now your attention for Justin Naik, who will tell us more about the acquisition of CGE Risk by WK or Wolters Kluwer. Justin, over to you. I will open the questions in the Mentimeter. There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. My name is Justin, as you said. I came from the eVision part of the business that was acquired and obviously become part of the Wolters Kluwer company. So I'm in a unique position to tell you what's going to happen with CGE, the journey that you're going to go through, but I'm also going to tell you a little bit about the cool software that we're going to build as well. So I'm going to start off with some slides, some background slides about who Wolters Kluwer are. If I click the right button. Here we go. So the numbers are looking quite good, and these are numbers that have been augmented by both eVision and CGE. So we've got 600 plus people now, which we're really excited about, and we're in 3 really good locations. So we're in the States, we're in the Netherlands, and we're in France. And that means we can really service our clients locally a lot better. Of course, that with those three businesses that are eVision, Enablon, and CGE Risk, and we are considered the leaders in our fields. So we're considered the leaders in ORM, Operational Risk Management, which used to be control of work, EHS, of course, from the old Enablon business, and also Bowtie XP, which is the #1 bowtie tool used in the world. I speak to any of my clients about Bowtie and they say, CGE Risk, they know who it is. We've got a lot of users, so we've got millions of users across the globe. We're on the cloud, we're on premise, so we're doing a lot of stuff with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and really pushing for cloud first. And it's that number down the bottom right, which has really changed with CGE Risk. And we used to be 60 odd partners around the world, and now we're 200 plus. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because that's something that's really exciting. So I mentioned #1, and somebody else on this call mentioned 1 + 1 = 3, and that's what we're talking about here. So Enablon #1 for EHS, eVision #1 for permits and operational risk management, but also CGE #1. And it's not just that. So those three companies coming together, that's 2,600 logos, but 400 of them are overlapping. So we can really see that we're going to be able to leverage our partner network and to show some cross value between those two companies. SBM is a great example of that, which I think Daniel spoke about earlier. I think one of the really good things is that all three companies are really interested in focusing on both customer and partner satisfaction. So we're really going to focus on that and make sure we've got great NPS scores. And the last thing I want to talk about is some of our software solutions and some of the innovations that we're going to do in the market that we hope are going to blow away the competitors. Okay, so we've got three bigger streams here. The first one you know really well, right? So Bowtie XP, Bowtie Risk Assessment, brilliant product. And that is served up through Bowtie Server. So you can actually share those bowties across your enterprise. And then there's Audit and Incident XP there as well, which are really shoring up the product stack. And this is my part of the business, my bread and butter. So control of work, which is permits, risk assessments, and isolations mainly, but there's a lot more to it now with forms, actions, work instructions, etc. But we've also got those field operations products. So we do shift management and logging, and we've got digital forms in there. And then there's barrier management, which you just saw Daniel speak about. So that's dynamic barrier risk management. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a video later. And EHS is really broad. So and they cover a lot of products and apps there. That's everything from that really core incident management feature that's logging everything from a slip and trip to a loss of primary containment, right down to the bottom, which is enterprise risk management. So lifting up that level of risk management for the whole corporation. And there's everything in between, including things like behavior-based safety observations and digital inspections. All of these are great sources of information for both barrier models, control of work, and how we operate. A little bit deeper, don't read everything on this slide, there's a lot of words there, but these are the names of the pillars that we're talking about here. So IRC, which used to be like very governance and risk orientated, engineering and ops, which mainly centers around control of work, but also includes things like chemicals management and all that core EHS business that I've talked about. And why is that interesting? Well, because CGE Risk is touching all parts of that business, and you can really see the crossover here. So if you go to the left, we've got that enterprise bow tie. That's not just bow tie printed out and put somewhere, that's properly enterprise. That's looking at the cause analysis and really looking at what happened. We've got barrier visualization in the middle, which is trying to bring that dynamically and out to ops and maintenance. We've got HAZOps going into PHA. We've got the operational dynamic bow tie that we talked about, and much, much more. So these are just the beginning of our use cases. And the big question I keep getting asked is, okay, but what's the value? What are we really getting out of this? And the answer is quite a bit already, and it's going to be much more. So you start off with the best and most used risk bow tie tool in the market, Simples. But then you ask, okay, what about my barrier and control effectiveness? How do I monitor that? How do I deal with them when I've found a breach? What about all the risks and causes, how I really identified them, and what am I doing with them? And when I've done all that, how am I making sure that I implement it globally and see that it turns up everywhere? So, I just got a bit smaller, but it hasn't gone away. So what we're doing is we're turning that into robust barriers and control measures, right? And we've got mobile inspections, we've got audits, and we've got live data connections. They're all feeding into the barrier model. They're all feeding into your control of work process. What about the risks and causes? We've got a great centralized global enterprise risk register. I'll talk a bit more about that. And we've got incidents and investigations database. We've got learnings there. We've got proactive learnings. We've got machine intelligence. And last of all, my bit of the business, we make sure we push all of that information out through control of work. So all the new barriers are there in work permits and tasks. We've got really effective risk assessments. We're really, on top of our game and continuously learning and acting on things that we learn. So just a little showcase here of how that would work as the whole risk solution end to end. So on the left-hand side here, you've got that place where you started off in the beginning. The process safety engineer building that bow tie as he was before, but he's learning now, right? So he's building the bow tie with learnings from the registers and from the incident investigation database. And then those barriers pop up as something real-time that's linked to real-time data. That's not just inspections. That's also everything from control of work. How many temporary defeats do I have, for example? And IoT devices. I've got emitters going off telling me something has failed. And then right on the side there, we see site graphics in control of work. And what we see is that site graphics is being colored by the cumulative risk there. So you can really see that it's already flowing through and impacted. And on the right-hand side, we can see all the barrier categories that Daniel was referring to earlier in the RP 544. And those are being impacted with initial and residual risk. And I can click into them and see the barrier model. I can see what's impaired, and I can go and actually proactively change my behavior. That's really all I have to say. So back over to you. I bet you've got some questions.
Yes, I have, Justin. Thank you for your presentation. First question, and let's start with what type of products do you have in the pipeline? Somebody asks.
Yeah, so we have lots of products in the pipeline. We're doing a lot with AI. We're doing a lot with predictive. One of our big use cases is mobility, and we're spending a lot of time and money there. The great thing about having Wolters Kluwer behind us is big $4.4 billion company. They continue to invest in us. They continue to allow us to hire. So we've got tons of projects coming out, and we continue to enhance the ones that we're building.
All right. Another question is that how can CGE keep their unique identity in this merger?
That's a no-brainer. Like I said to you, everybody I go to says Bowtie XP, CGE Risk. They know that company. It's not going away. The great thing is the people that built that company are still there as well. I'm talking to them on a daily basis, and they're a great company to work with. It's the way that eVision still has its flavor and brand. You know who we are. We're just a part of Wolters Kluwer now.
Okay. When can we see the CGE Risk's product integrated into the larger platform? Somebody asks.
Very, 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 very soon. So we've got an SPF.
That is tomorrow, Justin.
We've got an SPF coming up in November.
Oh, right.
And that's where we showcase all of our products.
Okay. Okay. So somebody asking, can you tell us something about the roadmap and the timing? This is the roadmap. And you said mid-November or early November?
Early November. So the big focus at the moment for all of us product managers is getting that platform together. We will be one platform. We'll have one look and feel, one login, one user experience across it with cross navigation. That's what we're going to be showing you, and that's the big focus.
Okay. Other question before we have the final question in Mentimeter for all the attendees. Seamless integration concept is great idea, and I believe as SMEs grow that they would adopt. But how would you convince a large multinational to change existing corporate platforms at significant cost and disruption?
Yeah, so actually we've been working on this one as well. We've got a concept called Why Change. We're actually appealing to EHS, operations, and risk management. And the idea is that instead of buying three, you buy one. We're going to be a one-stop shop. And we're already getting great traction in the market there. which you've heard from SBM, but we've also got lots of other joint customers who are coming to us. If you want to know more, ask me. I've got a great story for you.
Okay. As the changes to the bow tie can be done easily, is it also audit proof on the applied changes?
Nothing changes on bow tie auditing. So we keep all that history. So it's all there still. We haven't changed the underlying technology.
You haven't changed, and you won't change?
Won't change.
All right, just asking. And then finally, what additional advantages are there in using Enablon versus bow tie server?
It's that linking. So you're exposing it up to multiple more users. Instead of just keeping it in the pocket of risk, you can actually show it on the enterprise level. You can use it for much more things than just operational risk as well. And it's going to be that two-way mechanism of getting information. So we can now feed your bow tie with credible information real time from the business, and we can do all of those beautiful integrations. Those joint use cases are going to be pretty wowy, I think.
Sounds good. Pretty wowy. Final question, and I'm asking everybody to grab the smartphone again, because we are curious to know from the demonstrations that you've seen today, what do you see as the most valuable use case from the combined platform? Is that integrating bow ties within an HAS enterprise risk register? Is that operationalizing bow ties with real-time data? Or is it pushing barrier learnings into control of work? Give you another 10 seconds to give the answers, and then I will briefly discuss in the other 10 seconds that we have left with Justin the results. And what we now see is that 60% says operationalizing bow ties with real-time data, and let's see, a quarter says integrating bow ties within an EHS enterprise risk register. Ex equo with pushing barrier learning. So the most people says the B answer, actually, and rising. They're all popular, but the vast majority says operationalizing bow ties with real-time data. Are you surprised, Justin, finally?
No, I think that's great. So if you think about the volume of users, it makes total sense. That big volume of our users here are concentrating on risk. But I'm really pleased that a quarter are saying, are seeing the joint use cases there. So actually, that's a really good number for me.
Okay. Thank you for all the answers, and thank you for the presentation. Justin Naik for Wolters Kluwer. Thank you.
A pleasure. Have a great day.
And ladies and gentlemen, we will now look into the future with David Metcalfe. He is co-founder and CEO of Verdantix. David, over to you. Looking forward.
Great. Donatello, thank you very much for that introduction. And it really is a pleasure to be talking to everyone today in so many countries around the world. As Donatello says, I'm the CEO here at Verdantix, and we are an independent research firm covering EHS, covering industrial risk management, and covering operational excellence. And what I really wanted to talk about today is one of the biggest trends that we've been seeing in the market for a couple of years, which has been accelerated by the crisis this year. And that is the shift towards real-time risk management. And we're talking about real-time as it relates to workers, so things like industrial wearables, as it relates to the performance of assets, so asset health monitoring. And from that, you can obviously get to the point of looking at real-time risk management for an entire site, for a facility, and ultimately for the business as a whole. So what is the context and the accelerator that we've seen this year? Well, we already saw companies looking at the concept of real-time risk management with digital technologies before the pandemic hit. And what's happened is the pandemic has really changed the opinion of a lot of executives who maybe didn't understand the potential value of digital. Because if you think about the challenges that we currently face, if it takes you 3 days to turn around test results for COVID, if you are unable to test people when they come to a workplace, you can't get to that real-time risk management. You can't have the controls in place. And that's what we're seeing at the moment in Europe. In France, as you can see here, in the UK, in Spain, those real-time risk controls are not in place. But what's interesting, if you look at this photograph, which is from a water park in Wuhan on August the 20th, it's actually, you know, people celebrating the fact that Wuhan has actually managed to control COVID-19. And of course, this is a rather ironic position to be in, given this was the origin of the pandemic in the first place. So it actually shows that with the immediate lockdowns that they apply of neighborhoods as soon as there's a case, they have electronic bracelets tied to mobile apps so they can tell if people are supposed to be self-isolating if they have moved. So there are things that you can see in terms of real-time risk controls that are actually helping these organizations to, or an entire city to improve the situation for the inhabitants. And our view is that this is comparable to an industrial business where you know that you have good sites and you have bad sites. That's the theme that I really want to look into. So let's just be honest. These are not Mentimeter questions. These are for you to sit listening to this presentation and just answer 3 questions for me, honestly, you know, in your own minds. So firstly, I'm assuming that most of you are going to answer yes to this first question. Are you striving to implement the best possible risk controls? Why wouldn't you be? This is your job. So secondly, do you agree with me? Do you agree with what the panelists speaking today have said, which is that real-time information and interventions can prevent many accidents? I'm not saying all accidents, but many accidents and asset failures. Now, I think there's plenty of success stories that would indicate that is true. So from a logical point of view, how would you answer the last question? Are you currently utilizing all proven technologies for real-time risk management? Now, honestly, sit there and only you will know whether or not you're being honest in how you answer. So let's look at some survey data that we have that goes back to that question. And this is a high-level question. We asked 284 managers in operations, engineering, and maintenance roles at the end of last year in our annual global survey. So people really like you. And what we wanted to know is how significant are different factors in terms of driving investments in operational excellence, which of course maps directly to safe operations, to asset reliability, to risk management. And even we at Verdantix were surprised as experts in the space to see that 96% of the respondents said the availability of new digital technology is actually a major driver, a very significant driver. And that beat out things like, you know, the impact of accidents in our industry, CEO-led strategies, even cost cutting. So, you know, there's a key point here, which is you do have to engage with digital technology to do the best you can around PSM and operational risk management. And then another question that we asked, getting more into the detail here and going back to some of the things that Justin was talking about, what we wanted to know was, to what extent is software being used in different organizations? And again, what you can see is there is quite wide use of software to improve risk management. You know, we've ranked this in terms of the level of adoption based on commercial software, which I think we would say is the best practice. But you can still see 7% of respondents are not using software for incident management and 30% not using it for management of change. And I think one has to be careful about this. So we see this as positive, but there's obviously a lot of you who are maybe using outdated Lotus Notes-based tools for some of these processes, so the in-house software. But this is not real-time risk management necessarily. The only software we would say that is by definition real-time is control of work. So this is simply saying you're using software, but it could be desktop software where you design your bow tie and then save that file. So there's progress, there's engagement with this. There's a clear understanding from the majority of you that digital technology is crucial. but actually the level of adoption so far is not so high. And so the question we often get asked is, well, how can we actually think about this? There's so many technologies being thrown at us. What should we be doing? And what we've realized is actually you should think of digital technology as one of the layers in the hierarchy of controls. And you can think about this really in three ways. So firstly, what digital does is it gives you all of that information about how you can manage risks. So that's the first thing. And I think everyone here understands that. But then the other thing that we've realized through the very broad research we did across EHS and operational excellence is at every other level of control, you're seeing the ability of digital to actually enhance the controls that you have in place. So, a great example of how the COVID-19 crisis has accelerated engagement with this is digital twin models of things like offshore oil rigs, where you don't have to fly technical experts on a helicopter out into the North Sea or out into the Gulf of Mexico, because you actually have an accurate 3D real-time model of that rig. So what we think is going to happen is, even after the crisis, we're actually going to see more use of these type of technologies to eliminate risk. Another great example, Chevron and Dow have committed that from this year, no technicians will be doing confined space inspections. So it's all going to be done by drones. So another kind of digital technology. In engineering, of course, there's a lot of IT and OT integration as a general theme. And so that is enhancing the controls that you have in place and monitoring their effectiveness. You can look at the admin level. So that's also around things like digital training or permit to work, which we heard about from Justin. And then, of course, PPE, the most used acronym of 2020, where you're seeing a lot of work around industrial wearables and things like computer vision to make sure people are actually wearing PPE they're supposed to wear. And then the final really interesting thing, which Daniel from SBM Offshore mentioned, is digital connects up all these different things. And that is what you get with a live barrier model. You're actually looking at all of the controls you have in place, and the barrier model is pulling data out of all of these different systems, wearables, asset health monitoring, drones, to give you a live picture of the sort of risks that you face. So is this really just something that we're talking about, or are we seeing a lot of engagement from people like you with wanting to do this and seeing how it works? And this is another survey that we did with 102 managers in EHS and operations roles. And what you can see is over 70% said, well, look, we see great value in terms of trying to connect up our information about assets. So is a valve going to blow, for instance, monitoring that, and workers. Are there some workers going to be doing some maintenance near that dangerous valve? And at the moment, a lot of that information is in very separate systems. But then you can also see there's a huge prize around integrated process safety management. And indeed, I think Enablon, CGE Risk and eVision collectively are able to deliver that integrated view. So let's just finish up thinking there about the people side of things and going back to the kind of concept of the pit stop and, what does the successful team look like? Well, part of the challenge, of course, is that you have people with very different mindsets. And like I'm saying, we've seen the COVID-19 crisis change a lot of mindsets, but it's, of course, not everybody yet. So you may have some senior managers who see the value of this and want to drive the program forward, and we've highlighted them in green. But then you may have some other people, mid-level managers who need encouragement, need some training, need to be educated about some of the concepts and how it's going to work. Maybe they're concerned about the impact on their job. But then often you're running into rejection of the technologies, sometimes because they haven't been thought through, sometimes because it's unions, sometimes they don't work because there's not sufficient communications. And so you can run into these issues. So a final self-assessment for all of you, and being a Brit, I like to inject a little bit of comedy into proceedings. So are you a cautious digital persona? So you yourself, but you could also think about people you work with. Are you cautious? Are you a little bit worried about project risk around, digitizing, barrier management, and so on? Are you worried about this? So you could think of yourself, are you Mr. Bean? The Rowan Atkinson character. But interestingly, we find people are very impetuous. I've certainly talked to some younger managers in their early 30s where, they've been willing to recruit 100 people into a change management program and actually been very successful. So going back again to that pit stop analogy, let's focus on the really successful teams and what they've done differently. But that's not always something that's going to succeed. So Captain Jack Sparrow, a bit of a maniac, really, certainly achieves things, but it's a bit of a bumpy ride. And then, are you a reliable type of person when it comes to digital projects? So you've got some experience, you know what to do, you engage the IT team, you've got enough understanding, maybe a few successes and failures under your belt to move ahead. And I think of these characters like R2-D2. It's not going anywhere very quickly, but he's always got the toolkit to fix things. And then the final one is, in a way, sometimes where you're going to be leaning on consultants or solution engineers at Enablon who've got lots of experience with different projects and can tell you, look, this is a 5, 7, 8, 10-year journey, and here is how you need to think about it. So is this you? Are you a kind of Bill Gates type visionary who really knows exactly what to do? So just think about that. But ultimately, it's not just about you, it's about all the other people you need to work with your digital risk management program. And so you can actually think about it in terms of you yourself running a project or other people involved, and how does that evolve over time? So, what level of success are you going to have? If you're Mr. Bean and everyone at your organization is Mr. Bean, then actually, you're not going to get very far. Jack Sparrow would get further, but frankly, he may get fired along the way for a disastrous project. R2-D2, you're actually going to get some great results over time. But, ultimately, you might want to think about how do we have maybe a center of excellence, right? Bill Gates type people. So you build all of that project experience, and it's not reinventing the wheel every time. So, yes, we're great believers in power of technology. Yes, it's had a huge boost because of the crisis, but it's still all about people getting things done. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to any questions.
And there are some questions, David. Thank you. Well, with whom would you identify, actually? Is that Mr. Bean, Jack Sparrow, Bill Gates, R2-D2?
That's a really good question. So I would say I'm more of an R2-D2, actually. So I do have experience both in software and telecoms businesses and in some web design. And yeah, I think what you learn is that, anticipate that things will go wrong, and it's going to take twice as long as you were hoping.
All right.
And that's the sort of understanding.
That's an honest answer. Let's go to some questions. Somebody asks, how about the risks such as cyber crime? Because, of course, we are facing more and more cyber-related crimes in the past and nowadays. So what will be the next step in preventing or dealing with this aspect, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're embarking on any of these type of projects, it is really important to engage with the IT, colleagues up front. Because what we often see is people in a business function, maybe asset reliability, maybe head of process safety, they really want to implement a new system, but then they don't involve IT early enough, and then it turns out the system that they really want to put in place doesn't comply with IT security policies, and so it gets vetoed after you put a lot of work in. Ultimately, this is not the job of the head of process safety. You lean on your IT colleague to stipulate whatever that security policy is. And to some extent, we do see that IT security issues hold back things around mobile apps, for instance, when it relates to operational equipment.
Okay. Then another question that was a little bit earlier in your presentation. How would you answer those 3 questions for Verdantix? And I'm especially looking forward to the 3rd question, of course, using all available technologies.
Yeah, it's a great question, and indeed, even a research firm has had to think very carefully around risk management. We've had to cancel. We planned a whole team building session in person for next weekend because of new restrictions in the UK. That's had to be cancelled. So yeah, I mean, I think on the last question, it's really tough. I mean, I'm not so relevant necessarily in terms of risk management for us, but thinking in terms of, are we maximising our use of digital technology? And no, the answer is no. And why is that? Well, number one, it's can we fund all of the things that we'd like to? So familiar challenge, and then secondly, it can be just the project execution challenges. So yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. Let's all be honest. That there's no organisations out there really that are doing everything they possibly could.
All right. Somebody else says, and well, that's a tip for us. Talking about real time, why are the questions which we were asking the sheets not in the Menti? So we could respond real time. Actually, I think it were more rhetorical questions to answer yourself. But well, we will take that into account. Next question: what are your thoughts on the joining / integration of CGE Vision and Enablon?
Yeah, look, I think ultimately it makes sense. So what we're seeing is a lot of innovation around industrial software generally. And you can see from the surveys that we've done that, I mean, that's in total 400 people that we've spoken to. And they're saying, look, we see a huge role for digital technology in the future. We're seeing more ambitious plans, but fundamentally, I think what firms want is something that's more joined up, especially around process safety management, because at the moment, typically there'll be multiple systems being used, and then you've got lots of issues around duplicating work, systems that don't talk to each other. So to have something that connects up a lot more of the workflow, I mean, just as SBM Offshore example of, moving towards that live barrier model, that is the vision that we think we hear a lot. And so it's much easier to achieve that if you can work with a firm like Enablon that's got, many more of the pieces of technology.
All right. And finally, if we're now looking at Industry 4, which is all about ongoing automation of traditional manufacturing and industrial practices, what do you think will be next? What will Industry 5 look like, actually?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a sly answer to that. I mean, our research basically says that most industrial firms have barely embarked at all on Industry 4.0. So you've got lots of examples of, Amazon, automating warehouses, Tesla that's building new factories where they're embedding solar and whole new ways of working into that. But, 95% of brownfield industrial sites have probably only done about 5, maximum 10% of the investments they could around Industry 4.0. So, let's redo this session in 20 years' time, and then
we will do
a recap on how much progress there's been.
All right. Thank you so much, David Metcalfe, the co-founder and the CEO of Verdantix, for all your answers and for your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that these speakers have inspired you to think about your own risk approach, of course, during this seminar. Whether you're just starting your barrier-based risk journey or you already have worked towards a dynamic risk picture, we really hope that you all got something out of this session to continue your important and valuable work. And therefore, I have the final question here in the wrap-up of this session, broadcasting live from The Hague in the Netherlands. And that is, to what extent did this event inspire you to think about your own risk approach? And of course, you have several answering possibilities. I heard nothing new, and I will stick to my current approach, which isn't a bad answer, because that could mean, well, I'm on in a good road and the approach is right. The second one could be, today gave me new insights that I might explore further, or completely inspired, enthusiastic about putting it into practice. Those are the answering possibilities. And I would be happy to know your answers. The final question in the Mentimeter with the code that you, I think, already have seen several times in your screen. I see multiple answers. I see that 60%, so the vast majority right now, it says that today gave me new insights that I might further explore, or 38% for now. Completely inspired, enthusiastic about putting it into practice, which makes me happy. Jop. Yes, that's it. That's great. That's great. And please continue giving the answer, ladies and gentlemen. And let's stay connected. There are multiple ways that we would like to stay in touch with you after this seminar. First, learn more about our advanced barrier management and how to apply the CGE Risk product portfolio during our webinar series. Connect the Dots is the name of the webinar series. Or rediscover the speaker's presentations, which we will share afterwards with you via email. So they will come up to you. And was your question not answered? Sorry for that. Don't worry, because we will do our utmost to give all the answers to your questions once that the answers are available. And don't forget to reserve your seat for the next year's network event, ladies and gentlemen, around the central theme, We Can Be Heroes. And I really hope that that would be a live event again, but we're not sure, of course, but hopefully the COVID pandemic is over by then. And as always, in case of questions or if you require assistance, please feel free to contact CGE directly, ladies and gentlemen. And I would really like to thank again all speakers present here, Jop Groeneweg, and of course all the speakers that are online. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And thanks also all of the viewers. For more information, visit the website cgerisk.com, cgerisk.com. Thanks for your attendance. Have a good rest of your day. And on behalf of CGE Risk, my name was Daniel Rowe. Stay safe, stay healthy, and important, stay connected. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.